Hello, my name is Vic Gilgis and I'm doing this podcast today. I hope it'll be of use to you. It's about helping ourselves, helping you when we get up in our head about bad thoughts about the past or the future, or basically if we're just not enjoying our now, as it were. And I've given it the title of swapping a bad now for leeches because the sometimes the ways and means that we choose to get out of that bad feeling, the distractions perhaps, or ways of handling our upsetness could be not as useful as we think they are, could be no use at all perhaps, and that's why I refer to the use of leeches, because in the past the doctors recommended leeches, but whether their effectiveness was as good as what they thought at the time, they have some effectiveness apparently in medical work, but it's generally associated with using an approach that is outdated, and there are better approaches, not approaches, better understandings that we have for dealing with our head being all in a bit of a conundrum over life, as it were. So that's, I hope, has explained what today's podcast is about roughly, and I'm going to start off with talking about it in the sense of we all have a backstory, and that backstory can be good, bad or indifferent. And if we, I was at a meeting the other week with people who were discussing their backstories, and some people got quite upset about it. Some people wouldn't talk about their backstories. And when I buy a backstory, I suppose it means things that have happened in the past to yourself that have perhaps traumatized you or upset you, or lead to giving you a now in your mind, current thinking about that past that is upsetting and has carried through in the terms of current trauma, current upsetness, current depression, current worry. So in that sense, our backstories, visiting them can be not so helpful perhaps, but we all have them. Personally, I relate to my backstories because I know I do this as an adventure, and people have said this, maybe I am a bit of a Pollyanna, but when I look back, it is looking at things that have happened to myself where I've had adventures and got through scrapes and come out of things, for the better. And I suppose a lot of that is ego, really. I know that, but and maybe when we look at this type of kind of ruminating about the past, or bringing up past rememberings, I look at it in the way that, in particular, I used to like talking about my past with my wife because we had a shared past and our stories of what happened, and they're usually quite joyful, something to laugh at. And obviously there was times, like in everybody's life, where there were bad things, but I don't think we went there. But some people do, and that's understandable because we can all do that. We all have backstories. It is when I suppose looking at things as an adventure, it is an ego thing, but that's what I do. But the thing is, I think I know that I'm doing that, and sometimes it can be a bit of a bore when you're telling others people about your stories. It certainly wasn't a bore when I was talking about it with my wife, with someone that I loved, and because it's nice to share experiences. I think the thing about it is that it's talking to other people about about your past or your upsetment now with life. It is nice to have to share something. A trouble shared perhaps is a trouble halved. I think that is nice when you think that someone has concern for you, But as regards life itself, I basically think, well, that life does not care one way or the other, because it is nothing to do with it. It is not life's fault. It is not life's business. Life just life's on, and whether or not sometimes we think life is against us or for us, basically life doesn't give a monkeys, because life is life. So don't kind of get attached to. I don't think there's any value in getting attached to thoughts of that life is doing it, is picked you out in particular. It is just basically, in some senses, the luck of the draw. Life is what it is. It is life. So I first come about this type of not being happy with myself and getting some treatment for it, and it wasn't leeches, it was counselling, is when I was at work. And when I was at work, things happened to me. Essentially, I thought that I should be getting promotions and wasn't getting promotions, and got upset about that and was fed up. And so it made me unhappy, and what I did, I undertook counselling. Now, the thing about that was the counselling, I explained this, that I was angry about, not getting on in my career. But what the counsellor did was, and I presume that this came from their training, is they looked into my past, or asked me about my past, as to what had happened to me and experiences that I'd had that led me to being exhibiting the behaviour that I was behaving. And I was supposed to have 10 sessions, and after the 4th session, I think it was, it's quite a while ago now, I gave up on it. And I was honest about it. I told the therapist that it was just like coming for an hour of misery, go raking up stuff that was being poked about in a way by the therapist asking me very probing questions, which I didn't think, revisiting that type of thing. As I say, normally when I go back into the past, it is something about something that made me laugh, or something that I overcome, or some adventure. And even what I think on one occasion the therapist did say to me, you just look at life as a past adventure. Well, life is not like that. Well, to me it was, and it was better than the way it was being dealt with. But that was the counselling model, I suppose. So that it certainly didn't help me. One thing it did do, it led to me exploring mind, body, spirit issues around what happiness was. I mean, then I was an engineer, ex-engineer, dealing in management of engineering, and being brought up with brothers and going to a boys' school. I didn't know much about emotions and what have you. And certainly when I went on to deal with actual subject of mind, body, spirit, and how the mind works, and why we have feelings and get depressed, then it brought out it educated me a lot in about how we think and how we feel and how we behave, and how we can manoeuvre our lives to get the best out of our lives. So in that sense, it made me do that, because certainly the counselling that I was undertaking at the time just wasn't of any use, but it spared me to get that type of help. Another time I went on a retreat, and the retreat dealt with different things. It was talking about this, that and t'other around depression and anxiety. And one of the things that happened, and I'm relating this to a bit to the title around leeches here, that basically it didn't work for me, certainly, was that the tutor, I suppose, who led the group, split us into pairs, and one person observed the other, and what we had to do was breathe for England. In other words, take gulps of breath, just keep taking gulps of breath, and what actually happened with me, and I was being watched by this, being observed in case there's something wrong, and the whole process was about like getting as much oxygen, I suppose, in you as you could, and then seeing what you thought about. And then after this experience, you related to your partner or the group as to what had gone through your mind and how you felt about things. So I did this breathing for England, and at one stage, I don't think there was a need to breathe. I think I had that much saturation of oxygen myself. But what happened with me was that, and when I explained to my partner, because this is what you did, as to what you were thinking about was, and it did surprise me. So there's some value in that, I suppose, is that I found myself sitting on a deck chair in my mind, up in the skies, but I could see below me because it was like a plastic platform, a perspex, so you could see through it, or a glass floor. And I'm on a deck chair, just getting the sun, and I'm happy with myself and all the rest of it. But what I could see around me was holes in this platform, in this glass. And my thoughts were that I was asked why was I not doing anything other than just sitting in the deck chair. And my reply in my head was, well, I'm not getting out of my deck chair because it's quite nice here. I like the sunshine. And if I get out of the deck chair, I might fall down one of those holes. So I'm staying here. And that was basically what went through my mind. And it was weird. Now, looking at that now, in fact, after that, I kind of analysed it a bit and thought, is this a quality in myself that, when it comes that I'm lazy, that I won't get off my backside and face challenges? And I berated myself. In other words, I was saying, well, are you really like that? And to be honest, I don't think, I think I am a bit lazy, but I don't worry about it. In other words, I didn't really worry about the thoughts that had gone through my mind during this breathing for England thing, because I just thought it's something that my mind had just given me at that moment in time, and I certainly wasn't going to jump upon it and give it a lot of meaning, which is what I think a lot of people do. They give meaning to thoughts when in actual fact any meaning could be given to thoughts, because it is just the mind, this inside, trying to come up with some construct, with some abstraction of what it means to our thought system. And it does it in order to kind of make sense of it and give you, in my case, I think it was giving me a criticism of, get off your backside, face challenges and all the rest of it. Well, I don't think that was the truth, but I think that's how my mind interpreted it. And I remember this took a while, probably 3/4 of an hour, and then I swapped over and did my partner. And that was the morning session for everybody. Other people did it as well. We had lunch, and then we were supposed to do an afternoon session of all this. And I said to the tutor, well, what will happen in the afternoon? Will I get the same type of thing? And he said, oh, no. He said, it's like, putting your hand into a black bag, as it were, a bottomless pit of things that could crop up. So he says, no, you'll get a different one. And then if we did it again, that was his experience. People just get different experiences with this procedure of breathing for England. And my view was, well, no, sorry about that. I'm going to have a cup of tea and a walk, because I think it'll do me just as much good. So, in other words, and I think this is true, the man can come up with a multitude of rhymes and reasons as to whys and wherefores, as to what life is about for you, and that it can lead you all over the place and drag you by the nose if you're not careful. And certainly if you think you've had a bad past, you can end up just ruminating around it as to reasons as to how you can have a better future now. In fact, going back to the when I started about the backstory business that I was talking about, there was one person in the room said that they had a traumatic childhood, and the way in which they dealt with the traumatic childhood was to take a picture of themselves that they had as a child at that age when, according to them, they had this trauma, and then look at that picture and talk to that picture with a reassuring voice that you're not that little person, that young person now, you are now an adult and can cope with things. Well, of course that's true, because when things happen when we're kids, we are innocent, really. We have not got a mature mind for a kick-off, and also the adult man can rationalise things and say, well, if you'd have only had an adult mind and had only, well, in this case, with a lot of what I called, what they call it, childhood strategies, is to say, well, you are loved, and go through it that way. But again, in that, I think it's faulty as a way to go about things, because memories can change over time, and I'm not going to go on about false memory syndrome, but when you go back to your childhood, then there's lots of things that you actually were fact that happened, but it is also lots of interpretations on things, and things where the way they were then and that is different to the way that things are now. So, in other words, it's like when you say, was Muhammad Ali better than Joe Frazier? Well, I'm talking about boxers earlier than that, that were there. They try to compare boxers of 50 years ago with current boxers and say, well, you cannot do that because the whole thing is different. It's like trying to compare athletes years ago with athletes now, because the training's different, the people are different, the equipment is different. You cannot do it. So to use that as a mechanism for dealing with, what is considered to be a bad past, I think is, well, the worst thing about it is that what it does, it goes into all the detail that person thinks about that bad past. In other words, it's dredging up all the mud which should have settled, or has settled, or could have settled. It is miring it all up again, and keeping that energy, that bad energy, that bad traumatized view of things and why it was like that and the ins and outs of it. It is that type of thing is just keeping it all alive. And that is where I don't think these things work. And so I'm saying that being up in the head with stuff is being up in kind of ideas and not theories, but abstractions of what is, or what went on, or what is even going on now. That something is happening, that you have a bad now, maybe because you think you've had a bad past, but say a bad now where you're just feeling upset and you're going up in your head to look for reasons. In other words, looking for a story as to why you're upset, and it is an abstraction. And I'm saying that because when we're up in our head, we're not up in what is real. It will seem very real and it will feel very real, but it is not reality. What it is a construct. Now, give you an example of this. That my daughter, my grandchildren clubbed together to get me a birthday present for my 80th birthday. Watch the wrinkles. To go flying. Because when I was a young man, I studied aeronautics and I went to Cranfield Institute of Technology, which was the College of Aeronautics, Cranfield. and I'd be about the age of 24 years of age. And one of the things about that particular, well, it was a master's degree that I went on, and it dealt with aeronautical engineering and management of engineering, that type of thing, is I was entitled to free flying lessons. Now then, what happened was that when I was taken up flying, so I was allowed actually 10 hours of flying, and in those days you could at least get your initial solo pilot's license. I only got up to 4 lessons and stopped it because I wasn't that good at flying. And one of the occasions, I remember I was pulling on the stick or doing something, and basically I was pulling on, because it was a light aircraft, it was a Beagle pup, and my knuckles were practically turning white with holding the forces on the stick. And the instructor said to me, trim off the forces, trim off the forces. And I didn't know what the instructor meant. And he pointed towards a trim, it's a little wheel. And what you do is you turn the wheel and it puts a flap off, which is attached to the wing, to counterbalance the forces that because the ailerons are attached to actual linkages. They're not on commercial liners. That's all done through hydraulics and what have you. But this was done when you fly in a light aircraft. It's manual. And immediately I had a bit of a revelation there when trim the forces, because when I'd done my studying prior to going to Cranfield, I dealt with, in aeronautical engineering, we dealt with trim equations, which were quite a heavy type of mathematics involving integral calculus. But I understood it, or I thought I did, about to use trim equations to find out, how the forces could be neutralised. And I thought I understood what trim meant, but it was just a concept. And until the instructor actually said, trim the forces, did I actually know what it meant. In other words, I got an actual experience of life instead of having a conceptual view of life through the mathematics of it. Now, so that is saying that when we are with life and being aware of life, because that's what one gift we have, is the gift of awareness, that we are and are not up in our head about interpreting life, as it were, then we are not going through an abstraction. We are dealing with life direct. Now, the reason that I'm talking like this is because just recently, Dr. Amy Johnson has started talking about being aware. In other words, being present with what is in your field of awareness. So you could be in a room, just being aware, sat there or stood there, being aware, and relating that to how you feel about that. And of course, what's going to happen, and does happen, is that we cannot legislate for thoughts coming in and out of our mind, good, bad, or indifferent. And what Amy is saying is, don't fall for the magic trick of, well, it's upsetting me, this thought, so what can I do about it? So it's like paying the gas bill, use less gas, or go and work overtime to pay for the gas. In other words, the mind starts looking for solutions to that bad feeling now, to that bad thought now. And what Amy is saying in that context, I think, is no, don't kind of look. In other words, stop resisting what is the upsetness, because it's there. It cannot harm you. It is there, and it is meant to be there. There's nothing you can do about it because it's occurred. But what the mind will attempt to do is avoid that and solve that. And I'm not saying he shouldn't solve problems. What I'm trying to say is that that is a way of our abstractions, our going up on our head, to deal with issues when in actual fact life happens. And what is being said by Amy is that staying with that feeling, it can't last, because the way in which thoughts and feelings go is it is like a flowing river. It will change, whereas once we seize onto a thought, and of course and resist that thought, and that's what I was talking about earlier, when you're delving into the past and looking at the whys and wherefores, it makes that thought persist, it brings it and keeps it alive. And so that, I think what is being said is, when you are with that presence that is there, be inquisitive about it. And one of the things about it is that when we stop being up in our head looking for the whys and wherefores, our mind is much clearer, in actual fact, a clear mind to solve any problems that we have. And that's the gift that we have, is a clear mind knows, because it is not up with your abstractions, not with your ego, your conditioning, your thought self, which is not your real self. So, my last thing here is, does a focus on, so if we're up in our head and we're trying to not be drawn in to particular thoughts, then what do we do? Because it's very nice sitting in silence, but I think sometimes, certainly what I do, so I'll tell you what I do, is I do this. My time when I'm up in my head, so I went swimming this morning, and this morning when I went into the sauna, that was some me time, and my mind started to think about what I was doing here and now this afternoon with this particular podcast, and how it might help myself doing it, and how it might help you people, you in particular, to basically be able to handle what could be considered to be a bad now, or to handle coping with traumas in the past, which is over and done with now, but can linger and be more magnified the more you dwell on it. And I do think it is about what the mind is. I mean, I think the mind wants to be preoccupied with something. That's what minds do. Minds like to solve problems. And I think if those problems are, how can I have a better now? This is what I hope we're doing now. Then that's fruitful, because it can get to work on that. I've come up with these examples of where things didn't work, but how things do work. And basically that came to me this morning in the sauna. So having a focus on helping others and helping yourself is a good thing for the mind to, if it wants to worry it about, because it's not a worry. It is the mind is equipped to come up with ideas of how to be in a better frame of mind, although you know, or I hope you know, that you are not your mind, you are the observer of your mind, you are more than that. And that's the secret of knowing, is that, no, come away from it, you are the observer, it is your servant, but it is a servant which likes to do certain things that can upset you, that it can bring to your attention. So I hope this has brought to your attention something that is fruitful, something that you can have a good now, and enjoy your life. Because when your mind is not on specific worries or specific instances, which we all have led a life which is our particular life, which is like with what I call horses, what they wear, the blinkers. When we're not in that kind of mindedness about our particular personal self, then our mind is open with our faculties of thought, which are vast. And as I've said earlier, when we are with what makes this all happen, which is our spirit, then the capacity or the ability of that to give ideas on anything and move the whole thing from a narrow picture to cinema scope, in fact, an infinite scope, with new ideas coming in because you're not focused as you were on your little self, through your little mind. Not that, and well, I would even say that that is where even personal love becomes a better thing, because we, with a wider mind, can see a more of a divine love in terms of just love for ourselves and others and everything, and that kind of awareness gives us big leverage to be in this real world that we're in, with the particular way that we think and do things. So I hope that's helped. Thank you for listening. Hope to see you next time. Thank you.